And thank you very much for everybody for joining today's call. Joined by Shona and Henry from JS Growers, and it's a fun one because they came to us. Well, I think I made a mistake in the email. It wasn't 2 years ago. It was last year actually. Time flies when you're having fun. But you guys were here last year, 2023.
Oh, was it last year? I thought it was before that.
I know, right? This is the
Oh,
thing.
yeah.
It's like
Feels like a long time ago.
so much has happened that we think so that the time is going faster than we think, but it's not. So you guys have been on this regenerative path for quite a while.
Yep.
So you've done a lot of work. We're just very, very happy to help with a little bit with that microscopy thing. And it was fun having all of the JS growers. There was 5 of you on that course filling
Yeah.
the room, including Julius, the director. So that was really great to see the whole team.
Yeah.
And then we bumped into to Henry at Groundswell, and he just casually threw at us that yeah, we've got 60, 70 JS reactors, and we've managed to cut so much phosphorus usage and all this and that and the other. I'm just going to see if I need to mute anybody. I think that's Henry. It's fine. So and then when I asked about using the microscope, he just went, "Duh! You taught us to use it, so we use it." So I thought this would be, well, we thought, me and Adam, we thought that this is fantastic news from you guys, and it would be great if you could say a few words of what you've been doing, what you grow, how you grow it, and what soils and where, and how this whole biology malarkey has been helping you, what do you use it for, and then we're gonna surely have some time for questions. So
Yeah, sure.
I'm gonna hand it over to you now.
Yeah, sure. So we are based in Cambridgeshire. We currently work on a farm of about 4,000 hectares, growing mostly salad crops, so celery, iceberg, gem, but we also do potatoes, onions, wheat, barley, maize for our the maize for our digester, some organic beetroot, and then we've got other farms across the UK in more sort of specialist products like radish, baby leaf salads, asparagus. We've got a mushroom farm, and then we've also got overseas as well. We've got our Spanish farms, farm in Senegal, Czech, and Poland. So we're sort of everywhere, doing a lot of different types of crop, but mostly what Henry and I work on is the salads based in Cambridgeshire. Henry and I specifically work for the future farming department within JS. My role being I'm an advisor, and Henry is more of a technical agronomist and heads up all of our digital ag platforms. In terms of what we do is that we work with each grower of product has a manager, and we work with each of those managers to help them achieve our sort of regenerative work streams and goals that the company have on a wider scale, and biology being a huge part of that. So we started making up Johnson Sue's about 3 years ago, but we weren't sure if that, well, we knew the effect, but we weren't sure if they why they were having effect, or we didn't know how to monitor them other than sort of sending tests off to the lab. So we thought it'd be really interesting to be able to use a microscope just to do some sort of ad lib testing, which now has become much less ad lib, and we do it every batch that we have. We run a microscopy test on each batch so we can track the continuity of our products. As Daniel just said, we have a lot of IBCs of Johnson Sue now because we've seen the value in it. We've got 82 currently, and 2 of those are almost finished. They comprise of 2 different batches. I'll actually share the screen. Henry, is there anything you want to jump in if I haven't missed off on the general introduction?
No, I can answer any questions that people have at the end.
Okay, I'll just share my screen just to give you an overview of our Johnson Sue journey. I don't know if that's sharing or not. Is that working?
Sorry, I can't see it. Oh, I can now.
Use Teams and not Zoom. Sorry, I'll just get that up as a slideshow.
Now we see it.
So I haven't really got just some pictures. Can you see it?
Yes, we can see it.
Yeah.
Definitely see it.
Yeah, so I haven't got a like some our journey has gone so far. So we in one of our
batches, Shona, I think you cut out. Do you want to
due to some concerns like with our salad products. Make fresh. Oh, sorry.
Do you want to start again? Because
sorry, I can't see you guys, so you could just gonna. Sorry.
I think you've cut out when you actually started presenting. You've cut out, so you might want to try and start again, please.
Oh, okay. Can you still hear? Can you still hear me?
So we can still hear you. We can still see you. Yes, and we can see the presentation.
Okay, I'll click through it just in case this is so I can see you guys now. Yeah, so these are just sort of images from when we first started making the map. It wasn't anything specific. We would just use equal quantities in terms of equal volumes of buckets from the telehandler of green and brown material. And then we'd scrape it back and mix it together with a telehandler bucket. And then use these IBC cages. We use this sort of netting that we use on the farm to protect the lettuces. We use some of this old mesh just so that we could ensure airflow throughout from the sides. And then we've got these posts in the middle, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, but these don't actually have holes through like some Johnson Sues do. We wait for them to sort of solidify after about 2 or 3 days, and we just pull those out, and then they've created their own nice airflow channels. We then sort of water them down with rainwater, or like our second batch, it was just really, really miserable weather. So we just left them in the yard for a few hours a day, and that sufficiently watered them up without us needing sort of any more personnel. This is just a diagram of the types of sort of constitution that we've got there. Yeah, wood chip and straw being the most of the brown. And actually in that batch 3, the wood chip that we used was laid in a wood for a while. So we scraped off some of the soil underneath that as well to act as a little bit of an inoculant. This is all from about 5 to 10 geographical miles from the farm. So it's all very local and it's, all organic. So we've got a mix of materials there. That's just to illustrate. And then we've also experimented with different types of batches. So stuff with higher nitrogen and stuff with higher carbon. That was just so we could see what would happen if we changed it up and how we can use those to specifically treat problems. For example, for this high carbon, we're hoping it would encourage more of a fungal dominance. And we've got fields which historically have been really prone to bacterial rots. So we've applied this to try and combat those bacterial rots to outcompete those bacteria. We haven't had any results for any trials yet. That was just sort of an ad hoc that field gets this specific batch. These are them just standing up after we'd filled them and after they'd been watered down. So you can see this, we do them pretty much to the top, and once they're watered down, they just sort of just come just below the rim there. In the first few days, it starts to heat out. That's a really bad picture, but that says 74 degrees Celsius, and that's just in the top of one of the channels. We get a big flush of mushrooms and any sort of weed seed that we've had, because some of what we've put in there as well is we've got the zern top cut, and we've cut some weeds from our lettuce fields as well, and put those in as well, because we're confident that we can strain it to a level where we don't introduce those seeds again, but it will still add some sort of biological purpose there. This is the shed itself. It looks a bit dreary in there, but that's our bank of 80. These first two actually don't have their irrigation lines on yet, but you can see in the background that slightly, I'll just zoom in for you. You see these black tapes here, that's just our irrigation. So there's a pump in the back corner there, which we can switch on, and it would just drip through these drip tapes and just water them when we see fit. We do it more on like an ad hoc basis. We would just go and visually assess it and dig it and see if it's the right sort of moisture that we're hoping for. We've never had it sort of sopping wet, but also we added worms in there as well, and we tend to use the theory that if the worms are enjoying themselves and there's lots of them there, so then it's probably a good sign. I need to zoom out now. This is just so that we have a record of our consistency and what batches we're using. This is just a site map of where each batch is and what date it was made, if it had manure in it, if it didn't have manure in it. And our system to brewing up is we take a sample of the tea after we've brewed it up, and we will monitor. Well, I will have a look at it under the microscope, and if it's up to the sort of, if there's a lot of life in there and a lot of diversity, which we're looking for, then we'll be happy to carry on with it. But sometimes we've had where it's only happened on one occasion where we've decided to write off a batch completely. So it would have been, for example, F9, and we tested it, had a look under the microscope, and it's really poor. There's nothing alive there. There's only bacteria. Then we just use that as a we just put a cross on it, and we don't go back to it. The two separate batches themselves made it at the same time on the same day. They're still very unique to eat themselves. So this is just a few images of brewing up. So we do it in an IBC with rainwater, and this is a I think it's called a GOT something. But we found it was from America. We found it extremely powerful for 1,000 litre IBC, to the point where when we were looking at samples under the microscope, having it on full rate, which was the only option, it was just on or not, on or off. We were looking at our samples and we had fractured nematodes, and things are sort of blasted up. So we've got this tap here that we just set the pressure at a lot lower rate, and that seems to work for us. And we've experimented with timings. So we find that 90 minutes on sort of 25% valve opening works really well for us. We've done that. We've established that by brewing up a batch, taking samples every 30 minutes, and working out if we've got enough abundance, diversity, if nematodes are physically damaged, or and we worked out that 90 minutes was pretty spot on for us. And there's no problem with it being at 2 hours, but just it sort of seemed to plateau slightly. And operationally, when we want to be brewing up a few batches a day, 90 minutes works for us. Yeah, so we have this big tea bag here, and we fit as much as we can in there. It's usually between sort of 12 and 15 kilos of material, but we just fill it as full as possible. And then the application, we can apply it in many different ways. This is with our direct drill for our winter wheat. It's also not the highest resolution picture, but you can see there it's just coming out of those jets right before we drill the wheat, and then it's here as well out of the nozzle on the hoe with our salad crops. That's celery there, and this is the latest that we would apply it if we're applying it for crop, because this is when we can get in and directly put it into the soil. The understanding being that it won't do much. Well, it won't do as much as it could if it's going straight onto the leaf and being exposed to UV. We want it to go into the soil and to the root zone. So, yeah, hoeing at about sort of four weeks in celery or 2 to 3 weeks in lettuce is about the latest we'd go on. But we also are applying it with cover crop drilling as well with this same setup. Oh, this is another slow-mo video of application. Don't know if you can see that video coming through there. And then just on to, in terms of general findings, from our 2023 trials. We trialed it across most of our crop types, but iceberg seemed to be where we had the most effect. And yeah, 13.5% on average heavier and 10% more uniform. In terms of objectives for us, in terms of trials with salads, we actually aim for uniformity more than biomass, because we already hit the specifications for our biomass, and the uniformity is actually really key, because you can go through and put all of those lettuces into the same pack for the same customer, rather than having to pick the smaller ones for different customers. So we mostly focus on uniformity, and our theory was here that it was just giving a bit of a helping hand to the plants that needed it, whereas the bigger plants that didn't need much help just wouldn't put out the sort of communication that required the help. That's just completely theoretical though. Excuse me. In terms of conclusions, yes, we had increased biomass in 6 out of 8 lettuce trials and increased uniformity in 7 out of 8. We had increased phosphorus uptake in the tissue test. So we did SAP tissue and biomass testing, and as part of the tissue testing, we did dry matter as well. So we could work out actually how much of each nutrient was in the field, and it seemed to increase phosphorus, which from our growth curves that we've created in previous years has been identified as really crucial for the starting stage, the first week or so of lettuce. So that was very promising. What this is referring to is we had a trial with iceberg last year, where it was the same batch, same variety, the same area in the field, same planting date, planting quality. And I went down to go and have a look at the trial, and the Johnson-Su application, the Johnson-Su applied area was harvested. And so we spoke to the harvest team and said, why have you, just out of interest, why have you taken that specific patch? They didn't know that the trial was there, and they said, oh, this was ready 3 days earlier. So it's really sort of gratifying to know that it had such an effect, that the harvest team had gone in and chosen that specific area, believing that it was maybe a different batch or variety, but it was actually the only difference there was our application of Johnson-Su, and that's not sort of quantified, but the visual assessments are really important to us, because it gets people on board who think, oh, it's a bit of a sort of muck and magic, which to an extent it is, but it gets people on board that it can actually do something. And then this year we've applied it on all of our potatoes, and we're just doing continued trials on other products. We've also seen that our fusarium has gone down with onions, which was done with an external independent agronomy firm. So yeah, that's sort of a really quick whistle-stop tour of our journey with Johnson C so far. And I think Henry can probably give us a bit more detail in terms of actually how that phosphorus replacement has really helped us, and in terms of our margins as well. If Henry's listening.
Yeah, no, thank you, Shona. So I could say, yeah. So the phosphorus piece, as Shona suggested, we've done trials through 2023. We've done some more trials in 24, but with results still with.
Camera that you could turn on, or you?
No, it doesn't work, sadly.
Okay.
Well, I say sadly. Actually, I'm delighted by the fact it doesn't work, but it doesn't work. Yeah, so we've done some. We've also done the trials there in 23, which Shona's shown, and we're doing trials through 24 as well. We're at the stage of obviously really compiling what those look like and what the results are from those. The stage we're at the moment is that we've established in nearly all crops that we've tried it in, or we've used the product in, that obviously there's clear boundaries within the season where it's going to work better and work less better. Obviously, in the spring when we're in our fleece crop, soil's very cold. We don't anticipate it to work very well. We have seen impact. We have seen positive impacts. We've seen zero impact, and we've seen negative impact, which we've probably put down to just sampling error. Then you come into the warmer soils. The results become a little bit more reliable, but not entirely reliable. So in some instances, we've seen very, very strong results where we're comfortably replacing all of our phosphorus input, which is our primary element. That's the primary element we're chasing nutritionally. And then we're finding some instances where we're expecting good results, but then not seeing them, and we're not seeing that in the field visually. We're not seeing that in sap. We're not seeing that in tissue. So we're now at the stage where we know that there's good and there's benefit to be had from it. We now need to learn what its limitations are, learn what situations it's not going to work. So obviously, Shona mentioned the microscopy we're doing on the batches to try and get as consistent product as possible. We're never going to get it consistent. It's obviously a biological product. It's never ever going to be consistent as hard as we ever try, but we need to try and put some process in place to kind of filter out bad batches. And then I think there's then sort of scope in the future that you take all the variables involved. So you take obviously your soil, maybe your soil indices from a phosphorus perspective. You take in soil conditions, temperatures, moisture levels, like the starting point biologically, perhaps. You then take environmental conditions into account, overhead weather, etc. We may then, over the course of the next 5, 6, 7 years, if we get enough data in the background, be able to almost model the kind of phosphorus, the phosphorus that we can kind of account for from the Johnson Su extract, or that the Johnson Su extract is going to be making available, rather. And that's the next step, because that's until we get confidence, we're not going to be able. So we're going to apply it fairly whole hog across a lot of the farm. We are doing a number of crop areas at the moment, and that's only going to increase over the next 18 months. But for us to be able to confidently reduce our artificial inputs on the scale and with the value of the crops that we're dealing with, we need to gain confidence in that product doing what we want to reliably, if that makes sense. But we get more positives than we get negatives. Or we get more positives than we get neutrals at the moment, but not always where you expect them. And you get your no impact sometimes where you think there might be the greatest impact, which shows there's still quite a lot to learn about it.
Yeah.
Super.
See there's some questions down the right-hand side.
Yes. So first of all, thank you very much, and thanks for coming on and sharing this. Thanks for the little presentation. I think it really shows that you've put in the work to wanted to record your activities, because this is quite important for everybody to learn. Have you been able? Can I actually kick off with a question, if you don't mind?
Yeah.
Sure.
Have you been able to do yet any correlation between the batches of the compost and the results that you've had?
Yeah, so this is only something that we started doing this year in terms of being more specific on what IBC is being used where. For example, with our celery team, they are using it standard everywhere. They're applying it to the soil, and then they're planting into it. So we have now got certain IBCs which are linked with entire fields. So those will be easy to track. But we haven't started collecting the data on that yet. But whereas if you apply it with the planter, like with like the plant take planter, for example, then it's slightly different because of the shelf life of the product, we can only use a certain amount of it, but because the planter runs quite slowly. So that will be in like very specific sections of the field. But yeah, in short, yeah, we will be doing that on our celery fields, linking the individual IBCs, which we've jotted down the counts as well. The only thing, which I've got a question for you, is do you have an easier way of counting bacteria than just counting them? Because it's impossible.
Okay, I do have an idea for you. So, but it's not tested by me, but it is something to think about. So, it's using something different than a microscope. So people have been using this microbiometer thing, which
Yeah, yeah,
and if you probably have got a kit there somewhere.
yeah, yeah. We have. Yeah.
Obviously, it doesn't translate to the microscopy. It's a completely different method. They don't correlate at all. But if you were to use it, basically as a time trial, so then basically you're comparing your sample of that soil in that place a month later, and then a month
Right.
later, then you should be able to see trends. And as long as you treat it like that,
Yeah.
then you can track these things. It's
Okay.
definitely going to be different than what the microscope shows you. In the microscope, then what you will use the microscope for is morphology and your protozoa and your nematodes. So that's it for you to try.
Okay. Yeah, we've got a couple of those kits, so we'll continue to use those. Yeah,
Unfortunately, when it comes to the microscope, counting dots, that's your favorite activity, I know.
Yeah.
That's never
Yeah.
going
I
to
was
change.
hoping that you were going to give me a magic solution there.
The word magic appears in this, but unfortunately, we still have to go with our eyes.
Okay, great.
Okay, so there are some questions in the chat, and I'm going to start with them. But because we're here in a small group, you guys can simply unmute at some point and just ask the question directly. It's not a problem. I'm going to start with Miki's question. At what rate would you apply your extract for wheat?
So we applied. Oh, sorry, Henry. Do you want to go?
Yeah, you've done your fair share. So we applied in the last drilling campaign. We haven't started yet now this year. We obviously will start probably around October time. We applied at 100 litres a hectare of extract, and at that point, I think we're doing about 15 kilos of solid to 800 water.
Yeah.
It's basically as much as we could get in the bag. So that would be a little over a kilo of solid per hectare extracted into 100 litres of water.
I would want to follow up with that question. I understand that you guys just look at most of the time you simply look at it and see if you've got organisms. But have you done actual counts when you do the extracts?
Yeah.
And if you have those two to hand, that would be great to hear. But
Yeah, sure. Hang on. I've actually probably got one open. My bacteria column is empty because sometimes I just give up with that.
yeah, that's fair.
Let me
Okay, that's
just
fair.
get it.
I was going to ask on that though. Have you got fungal to bacterial biomass ratio? Because I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of starting out, but to my mind, if you've got really high bacteria counts, maybe that's because you've not got the balance that certainly Elaine Ingham, for example, argues for, of 1-to-1.
Yeah, so
that would be kind of, that's what popped into my mind when you said I'm struggling to count them.
yeah, and that
I'm doing the foundation bit, but not got to the microscopy yet.
Yeah, so the that's exactly why we were trying to count the bacteria so that we can try and sort of correlate the two. But obviously that's a little bit more tricky in practice. But we also have been doing PLFA testing, phospholipid fatty acid tests as well, which can give us a bit of an indication as well.
And by the way, microbiometer, that's also the same test.
Yeah, that is bacteria to fungi, isn't it? It's just not sort of species specific, but it will tell us that. I'm just going to share my screen. Let me know when you can see it.
Yep, it's up.
Yes.
Yeah. So everything that we record. So the production date of when that batch was made, the brewing date, then it tells us sort of how old that batch is once we've extracted it. Source material, that's just, as I showed you before, the IBC map, the water type. So this is something I didn't mention. So we preferentially use rain water, but if we don't have rainwater to hand, we will use mains water, but we use that big extractor that we have and just pull the valve to sort of the full level and just push oxygen through it so that we can gas off any chlorine. And we'll make a note of how long that's been. And when that says double gas, it's just we've put two extractors in one IBC. So basically creating like a jacuzzi. And then, brew length, some of these to be filled in. This is when we started recording it more seriously. Before that, we would just sort of ad hoc look, well, we'd look at every sample under the microscope and just check to see that everything was there. But since more specifically, and then we put any details of who made it up, where it was going, intended field, and then the application method. This is just the pipette calibration technique that the guys taught us when we were with them, counting sort of how many drops in a known volume of water so that we can basically work out what size our drop is, so it can become useful later in terms of multiplying up and working how much of each we get per litre. So nematodes we look at on the whole slide, and as you can see, we can have none or 3 per slide, and it's quite a crude analysis to say that you've got 0 nematodes in that batch versus sort of 18,000 in that batch, just because we found 1. So it is still quite it's still not very granular.
I'm
but it just gives us a
slight. I'm interested in that nematode, which is the 0.66667.
Where are you looking there?
Just after the comma, don't worry. Silly joke.
Oh yes, yeah, on average. And then we do so slightly. It's not super scientific in the way that Daniel and Adam taught us how to do the dice method on the microscope, where you take 25 fields of vision on one slide, just because we have day jobs as well. So, and it takes a long time. So we take 5 frames of vision in a dice shape on the slide, and we'll just count protists and amoeba. And this is again, very crude, not specific, whether it be testate, naked, any sort of protozoa. We just count it just to give us an idea of what we're seeing and how each batch is looking. And then in terms of fungi, looking, instead of sort of measuring strands of fungi, which we do see, we just go for fungal spores, just because they're easier and quicker to count, and it gives us a quick sort of indication of how much fungi we've got in there. And as you can see, one that I've done today had 47 in one field of vision at 400 times magnification. So that was a very sort of concentrated patch there. And then we also have here, if there's any other notes in terms of if it's brewing. So here you can see very poor, don't use this IBC again. Very lively. Here we've made notes if the nematodes were dead or fragmented. So we looked into the operation, what happened there. Maybe it was the tap was accidentally left open, and this was today. And I've spoken to Adam about these mites that we found in this particular sample. So that's how we track it. Essentially, it's not the most scientific, but it's just a way that we find useful.
No, that's fantastic. Making it useful. That's definitely that's definitely something that needs to happen, right? So the whole point of using the microscope is that it gives you the information that you need just to do your job. So great job on creating that spreadsheet. So you've got a simple way of keeping everything together. That's fantastic. There's hold on, what's is there another question there? Have you measured soil organic matter levels, and is there a trend towards an increase? Asked by Emma.
Yeah, I'm happy to take this all, Henry. But we have, I think it's been mentioned in the chat there, we've got extremely high levels of organic matter, which can range sort of from about our lowest. What was our lowest, Henry? Probably about 7.
So technically our lowest is a little bit of Brecklin we got, which is probably 1 or 2, but the lowest for the majority of the farm would be 7 to 10. Then we go on some skirt fen, which would be sort of 15 to 25 perhaps, and then some of the real proper deep peats will go all the way up to, they'll range from 40 to 60 percent, which is a great strength at times, but at times is also our greatest weakness. It can be very, very difficult to grow crops in and to control crops at 60% organic matter.
In the warmer weather with fallow crops, it can it can grow very quickly and not to when we want it to, and sort of cause bolt issues and stuff like that. So and in terms of the question, we haven't been monitoring its change on soil organic matter because it's not our key priority to increase per se. But we do monitor our organic matter levels anyway, using TerraMap.
Another question from Emma. Are your commercial crops always undersown with cover crops? And how do you terminate your cropping beds? And what's your protocol to reestablish them? So
not technically undersown in the strictest term, but all the land does get a cover crop every year. I'd suggest that the average would be something like 1.7 cover crops across the whole farm, where some will get an overwinter, then a green manure going into its cash crops, and will get just its overwinter cover crop and then into a cash crop. So we probably do about 1.7 cover crops per crop across the farm at the moment. And then destruction is in some cases direct drill. In some cases it's quite heavy destruction in terms of mechanical, and then ploughing in the spring when soil's wet. And it depends entirely on the circumstances. So because of the crops we grow, we start planting early February, and we basically have to plant every single day through to the middle end of August. And so if we get a spell of wet weather, we can't just simply stop and do the right thing necessarily for the soil in all circumstances, we may occasionally have to whip out the 14 furrow and flip it over.
So I've got a question from Charles, but before I ask Charles this question, I want to actually follow up on your cover crop strategy. When you put cover crops in between your cash crops, do you ever look at what the previous crop was needing and lacked, or what the next crop is needing, and then devise your cover crop strategy according to the nutritional need? Or is
No,
that
so we're not going that granular. We tried, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, we tried getting really, really sort of picky and like intricate with our cover crop mixes. Not necessarily chasing that specific goal, but we soon found we had, I think, about 12 different cover crop mixes at one time. It became really fiddly, really difficult to manage, and we just tying ourselves up in knots. So we've gone back to a more simple approach. All the crops on the farm will probably use 2, maybe 3 different overwinter cover crop mixes, which are specific more to the time of year that the land becomes available for it, rather than the specific needs of that field. So we have cover crops, obviously, that we start drilling our first our pre-wheat cover crops. We'll start drilling it this week. Well, we're probably not looking at how it's gone, but early next week we'll start drilling our pre-wheat cover crops, which is specific warm season cover crops. Lots of diversity. I think 8 species in there. But we obviously only do that for this part of the season. Then as we get a little bit later on, we move to a more appropriate mix for the time of drilling, and then later on again, change again.
So then Charles is asking, do you see significant differences in responses between different soils and different cover crop mixes?
Yes. Nutritionally, yes, but we're trying to. It's quite difficult to disentangle sometimes. But the physical properties of the soil would be the primary indicator that things are working in terms of just improved structure. We've made a conscious effort over the course of the last 4 or 5 years to protect what we call the mid zone. So if you think of your soil profile, we have that top 10 centimeters, maybe 15 centimeters, which we have to till. The majority of our crops require built like billiard board level conditions. Our lettuce planters have to go into level conditions. Celery is the same. And we'll find with cover crops and with reduced tillage, it's not the lack of tilth or the lack of soil structure or anything that's the problem. It's the levelness, and our machines simply won't run in it. So that top 10 to 15 centimeters, we are happy to till, and we will always till. The next 15 to sort of 35, 40 centimeters, that's the mid zone. That's the area where we're making a very conscious effort to disturb as little as possible. We then do low disturbance subsoiling below that, but with very, very narrow feet. So we will disturb below, we'll disturb above, but we try very, very hard to allow that middle 15 to 35 centimeters to be completely undisturbed and to maintain those roots from cover crops that then the cash crops follow through. And we can go and dig stuff, and we can find roots from all phases of the rotation and of the cover crop situation through that, and it's all basically undisturbed at that level.
So I've got a follow-on question actually on that, since you mentioned deeper disturbances. Do you have any data on compaction layers when you do that? And have you had any chance of injecting your biology into those sub-levels yet?
So we haven't injected into the sub-levels. We don't really deep tillage for compaction per se. It's not really compaction in terms of like pans and things like that. It's to break up. We've got very magnesium-dominated soils. Mm-hmm. So even with that high organic matter, we can have organic matters of 30%, but the soil, as it dries out, the magnesium draws it so tight. It's about fracturing those sort of larger aggregates, sort of the size of a football. That's what the deeper tillage is for. But no, we're not injecting anything down there. What we're doing at that stage is more likely we're putting feed down, so molasses, and so we're bridging gaps, molasses and fish hydrolysate. We haven't done a lot of it at the moment, but it's something we're looking to do.
Okay. And then Hugo's asking, what are you using for subsoiling?
What
what are you using for subsoiling? Yes, what equipment?
Yeah, just in terms of like the what out of interest, what tool do you use for your? You mentioned the mid layer and then the layer beneath that. Are you using like a chisel plow? Is it?
No, so the very deepest we do is we've got a Heaver subsoiler 11 leg. So we run at 2 different spacings on that. We run at a 50 centimeter spacing or a 70 centimeter spacing, and that depends obviously on the soil type. We've got the raw sands, and then we go out and some heavier stuff. But the widest foot we ever have on that is probably no more than 4 or 5 inches. So very, very narrow, and they're changed irregularly. So they spend most of the time running at more like 2.5, 3 inches.
How deep do they cut?
So we take it deep. We do go down to sort of 16, 18 inches with that.
And is that kind of like a yeoman's plow equivalent kind of thing?
No, it's a high rake angle subsoiler leg.
Okay, so I'm just asking from a place of ignorance. That's all. So it's just fascinating hearing what you guys have had to say. So
yeah, then we have a multiple tillage. So we have a sort of standard. We use a horse Torano, which works that sort of to 15 centimeters. It's got some discs, then some tines, and then a roller. But we run that as shallow as possible. That's really for leveling, and then we power harrow to about 6 inches, to about 5 to 6 inches, and that's basically all the tillage we do. Apart from when we're absolutely needing to, we plough.
And then James has asked the question: have you tried applying the Johnson Soup product as a foliar spray? As you mentioned, you do a lot of sort of dribbling along the plants to the soil, but have you actually used it as a foliar spray?
Yes, yes is the answer to that. We applied it actually at our greenhouse stage, at propagation stage, because we could cover a huge amount of plants, and thinking it might be a good way to sort of kickstart the plant before it even gets into the field. We've sort of theorized that the UV, especially in the greenhouse, potentially had an effect on the biology there. But we actually can't, the way that when we apply our Johnson Soup, we brew it up with molasses and fish hydrolysate, and especially with our salad crops,
nitrogen.
we cannot put fish onto the leaves of the foliar leaves, because then that would not mean that your salad isn't vegan anymore. But from our understanding, we've been told, whether right or wrong, that it's best performing when we apply it straight to the soil, and it can sort of start to proliferate on its own and communicating with the root zone, rather than sort of maybe the specifics like phyllosphere on the leaves themselves.
Could you dip the plugs, do you think, in the glasshouse?
Yeah,
I'd imagine that would get you around the foliar side of thing. And
yeah, absolutely. And that's actually something that we're trialing with a different form of plant, because we've got different types of like sort of plant tape blocks, and then there's a new system as well, which we're going to try. And we're actually going to try potentially using some of the not the wasted material, as in the stuff that we brew up in that tea bag. At the moment, we dip it into an empty IBC, but we could potentially use that as a blocking substrate, and putting it into the modules. But that's another work stream that we're working on at the moment.
So then oh, sorry, Sam.
Well, yeah, I was just going to ask one. Once you've planted it out, so you've dribbled it on for some or all of the field, and then you gave the example of they preferred that bit for harvesting earlier. What's your kind of fertilizer regime for the rest of the growing program? Is it conventional, or do you give it less because it doesn't need it, or do you leave that out and try and keep it as a kind of bespoke, non-synthetic type of vibe? Because from what I've kind of learned with the Soil Food Web is she gets very funny about high ECs and synthetic fertilizers and salts and things like that. So I was just wondering if you've thought about whether you're kind of undoing the good stuff that you do at the beginning, or you don't really see it like that.
Yeah.
So no, we still go ahead and we'll still apply the fertilizers or the nutrition that the crop requires. We have moved to what we're sort of terming, but a reactive agronomy model. So away from the belt and braces, that sort of repeatable, robust, do all your fertilizer plans at Christmas, do your blight program in January type agronomy. There's certainly scope on the arable crops, which are ultimately just used as break crops, albeit they make milling and make a lot of money at the moment. To potentially look at assessing those opportunities of reducing or completely eliminating synthetic fertilizers. I think there is a lot of opportunity there. The issue is on the salad crops is the scale that we're at and the position we hold within the sort of salad market. That
so
I can't go to Tesco and say I've got no lettuce, but I've got loads of fungi. It won't.
Yeah.
It won't
so
wash.
At the moment, you're kind of doing part of the field, and thus it gets treated as the rest of the field is basically. But do you see legs on it to go to a whole field scale?
It is whole field across our celery crop at the moment. Okay. It will be whole across a good proportion. Basically, all of our direct drilled wheat will be. We'll get Johnson's food simply because we haven't got any kit on our other drill. And then lettuce, we still got to plan what the systems we're going to use next year. Lettuce, it will probably be a standard approach from week 19, which is first week of May-ish. It will become a standard approach from that point in the season.
I'm sorry, so what is a standard approach? Is that all foliars, or is it...
No, it's mostly liquid liquid from Yara. We do use foliars, but it's a very short grow cycle. So this is the other issue. You're growing lettuce in the summer. Little gem lettuce can be ready in 33, 34 days. Often by the time you realise you've got a problem, it's too late. Sure. So we have to be robust, and this is what I was saying right at the beginning around getting confidence and understanding how to make the product more reliable, which is the same story with many biologicals, is that you need reliability. And when you're in short growth cycle crops, you need it even more because your opportunity or your scope to actually affect.
Well, I'm trying to start looking at it so I'm from Vitacrest, but in the glass house. So I want to start trying to do it in our potted herbs, which is a similar vibe, kind of 30 odd days, but you're not in the soil. And it's fast, and it's same thing really. We supply a lot of it, so it's interesting.
Good.
So then a slight change of the subject. Question from Adam. Adam has asked, did I see you modify the power harrow? What does that look like?
We've not got the power harrow modified. We've got the drill modified. We've got the Toronto modified.
Power harrow we can put it on with though, can't we?
Yeah, we could technically put it on with the.
We have done it, I think.
Yeah. So So we have got spray bars on the power harrows, but they're typically used for fungicides. So it won't. Well, not fungicides, rather herbicides. So it won't go too. But it's just a spray bar. It's just a spray bar on the back of the machine.
Spray bar. Okay, fine. And then there's a couple of similar questions. One is, have you tried drenching your extract onto plugs or modules? And that's from Tom. And then Charles asks, have you tried compost extract on seed rather than just in furrow? So kind of similar. So
both of those, the drenching is where we hypothesize it to be its most powerful. However, the trials we've done with it have shown probably, would you say a reduced effect, Shona?
Yeah, definitely compared to we had trials in field that was injected like under the planter at the same in the same week as the plants that had been drenched being planted at the same time, and we saw an effect on the stuff that had it applied to the field, and we saw a neutral effect on the greenhouse stuff.
And then to follow, yeah, everything applied to. So our primary, you saw those photos that Shona showed, and there was one where it was running it down the side of some celery. That's the anomaly. All other all other areas where we apply is direct to seed or directly beneath the plant at planting.
But sorry, Henry.
Yeah, go on.
I was just going to say, in terms of actually like treating seed with it, as in coating seed, that's something that we await. So I'm sure you're all aware of Regen Ben. I think he's got some involvement with you guys. But he's talked about doing trials.
You'll find my picture on his website, yes.
Yeah. So he said he's doing trials with that in terms of getting that right before we try it. But with our potato planting, we point the nozzles inwards, and as that the seed potato goes down, it gets drenched in it. So that's sort of the closest we've got to sort of drenching / coating seed.
Okay. Any more questions?
I just saw the top one from Clyde about what type of worms. And we use Wrigley Wrigglers, the company, and they're a mix of red wigglers and what's the other one called? I can't remember what it's called. It's their compost worm mix, and it's Dendobanus, and red wigglers. Yes, that's the one. So those two, and then we also using some of our own worms as well, just to get sort of an inoculation from our own soil. But they've multiplied up themselves quite well, so we can transfer them between IBCs as well with new batches.
Yeah, thank you.
And then I've got a question for you guys, because obviously you came here, did the microscopy. Would you recommend coming to us to help? You know, if you're a farmer basically and you're trying to use the Johnson Sue's, would you guys recommend coming to little old Surly College laboratory to understand how to do this stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, using being able to understand what we're brewing up and have some form of consistency has been really, really useful. Because we were just sort of throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what would stick before. But at least we know now. We can identify if we've got a lively brew or if there's brews that we're not going to use. So definitely, would recommend.
Yeah, no, would also recommend. I'm going to have to take my leave at that point, but thank you very much. And if anyone's got any further questions, forward them on by email, and I will do my best to answer.
That's very kind of you, Henry, and I believe I copied you guys, CC'd in the email before this call, so people do have access to your email. So feel free to pester Henry. There was one next question from Tom Rogers.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Henry. See you later. There was one last question from Tom Rogers. How do you collect the worms prior to brewing? Adam already says you don't. They can take it. We do treat them with a paddle mixer, so we do have a lot of experience with that too. What do you see, Shona? With the
what in terms of getting
brewing,
worms,
like in terms of brewing, like what happens to the worms when you're brewing?
I don't want to trigger anyone, but they die. Like probably the worms we put in at the start of the process of them composting, and the likelihood of them getting into a bag of our compost tea is high. I guess they might be able to survive a 90-minute brew, because then they get tipped back into its own IBC again with moist compost, so they might live. But that's something I potentially should have explored.
That's great. Anything else, guys? Any more questions? If not, thank you very much, Shona. We thanked Henry already, but thank you very much for coming on.
No worries.
If you guys have got more questions to Shona and Henry, feel free to pester them on email. And yeah, we love to see the results that you're doing. Please keep on with the great work that you're doing. If you've got any more questions to us when it comes to those Johnson Suez and whatnot, feel free to shout. And anybody who would want to play with a microscope with us, just give us a shout as well. Go onto the website, and that's it. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, great.
And we'll see you guys soon.
Thank you. And yeah, anyone get in touch with any questions on email, I'll be happy to answer.
Super. Thanks for that.
Cheers.
Thanks
Okay.
very much. See you later.
Bye-bye.